An elite cornerback decommits from LSU, and while Rocky Top is on top of the college baseball world, what's going on in Austin may have the domino effect to impact Baton Rouge. It's Locked On LSU. Let's get it.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for being here with us, and thanks for making us your first listen every day here on Locked On LSU. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts, and of course, on YouTube. So please subscribe to the podcast, rate us, leave a review, and if you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. Brian Kelly loses a major commit for the class of 2025, and Tennessee wins its first baseball national championship. But what's going on in Austin after they fired David Pierce is the thing that actually could have the domino effect that impacts Jay Johnson with respect to the portal. We'll get to that on today's episode. We're thrilled to have you aboard with us here, and we are brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. It was such a profitable weekend for Brian Kelly on the recruiting trail. Such a fruitful weekend, maybe a better way to say it. Friday Night Lights, LSU landed their first two commits for the class of 2026. They land a big edge out of the state of Florida for 2025, a top 100 overall player, and it felt good, like you were going to hit your hit your head on the pillow on Sunday night and wake up and all would be right in the purple and gold universe. And wasn't to be. Late Sunday night, a top 100 cornerback, Jabori Antoine, decommitted from LSU. Look, there is I'm going to tell you about Antoine, and I'm going to tell you significant why this in particular is significant, how LSU can overcome it. But it is worth noting, look, there is a long way to go until the December signing period, right? When Jabori Antoine and the rest of the class of 2025 can formally put their name pen to paper and formally become members of the signing class. So a long way to go. And there's a lot of recruiting pundits that still believe Jabori Antoine will end up at LSU. But man, it is really hard to say this any other way than this sucks. This sucks for a lot of reasons. First of all, we know LSU's pass defense a year ago was atrocious. They were 118th in the country in pass defense. DBU, as we all know it or knew it, has eroded. You do not see NFL players littered in that secondary anymore. You see transfers and 3-stars, quite honestly. And they went and got Corey Raymond to get guys like Jabor Antoine. That's why you bring Corey Raymond back to Baton Rouge. He was the godfather of DBU. And when I say that, people sometimes like clap back at me. Oh, Corey Webster and Travis Daniels were here, LaRon Landry. Yes, there were a lot of great defensive backs that were here before Corey Raymond. But for a decade, Corey Raymond solidified it and threw gasoline on the fire. So to in any way minimize his role in building LSU in the secondary into what it was is just insincere. So you bring Corey Raymond back to get guys like Jabor Antoine. And this one stings in particular because Jabor Antoine's from Westgate. He's from New Iberia. Corey Raymond's from New Iberia. He's from New Iberia, played at LSU, the godfather of DBU, and Jabor Antoine decommits. I mean, that's exactly the kind of guy you think Corey Raymond is it's a lock. Now, I'm looking here on my screen and the On3 recruiting prediction machine, and 95.4% are the predictive odds of Jabori Antoine still ending up at LSU. So, yes, he's visited Florida, he's visited Miami, and he's considering options. And I don't blame him. He's a young guy, and you have options, so consider whatever people are offering. But the bottom line is LSU's coaching staff, their collective, their support staff have got to get together and make sure this kid ends up in Baton Rouge, because he's exactly the kind of kid you can't miss out on in the state. Gigantic position of need. The number 2 player in the state. Harlan Berry's the number 1 player in the state. The running back out of New Orleans. Number 2 is Jabori Antoine. Like, you got to get this kid. You sure can't lose him to Florida, where Corey Raymond came from, or Miami. So, forgive me, Florida State. Miami and Florida State are the 2 visits. Not Florida. Forgive me, Florida State. But still, and I look at this in particular because, DBU, as Corey Raymond built it, was built on the back of Louisiana players. Y'all, Derek Stingley was from Dunham in Baton Rouge. Christian Fulton went to Rummel in New Orleans. Tyrann Mathieu went to St. Aug. Morris Claiborne and Trey White were both from Shreveport, Fair Park, and Green Oaks, respectively. Harold Simon is from Eunice. Dante Jackson went to Riverdale in New Orleans. You get my point? Like, you didn't. Yes. Patrick Peterson came from Florida. Jamal Adams came from Dallas. Yes. There were Grant Delpit came from Houston, but he was a New Orleans, native who moved post-Katrina. Yes. You went out of the state and got good players, no doubt. But look at the history of the great defensive backs in this program. And they're guys from Louisiana who stayed home and built that reputation. And that's what Corey Raymond came back to do. And it starts with a guy like Jabor Antoine. And I look at Florida State, and I look at Miami, and yes, they have deep NIL pockets. I know John Ruiz is a billionaire who's very, very brazenly flaunted his NIL deals down at Miami. But this is one of those where LSU has got to prioritize. I'm not saying you go with a blank checkbook like what the defensive lineman from TCU wanted, Dominic Williams. Wanted $1.2 million. How do you justify that? The highest, paid player from the collective, the highest NIL deal on LSU's team is Will Campbell at about $500,000, as I'm told. How do you justify bringing in a guy and paying him 1.2, double what you're paying Will Campbell? You can't. So I'm not saying you're careless, but you have to prioritize Jabori Antoine. My guess is LSU will do that. And by all indications, the people follow recruiting and are looking at are still projecting him to end up in Baton Rouge. So we'll see. Now, as I look ahead, and keep in mind that 2025 class right now, so you're down to 12, you were at 13, you're down to 12 members. Jabori Antoine was your highest rated defensive prospect commitment in that class. Well, now it's Jesse Harold, the defensive end out of Tampa, who you got committed over the weekend. He now becomes the highest rated defensive commitment in this class. So it was a massive get for Brian Kelly and for his staff this past weekend. But you got to get Jabori Antoine back. And especially because when I look at 2025, just consider this. If you look at the cornerback room for 2025, you're going to lose Zy Alexander, right? Zy Alexander is coming back for another year. He's coming off the torn ACL. We'll see how effective he is. But you lose Zy, everybody else still has eligibility. J.K. Johnson can come back for a 5th year. Jair Brown can come back for a 4th year. Toviano and Stamps would be 3rd-year players. Woodland, Causey, Foster, Turner, the 4 freshmen this year will be going into their 2nd year in 2025. But of all the names I just rattled off to you, do any of those instill this deep-seated confidence like that's the guy that's going to be the All-American, that's going to resurrect the good vibes of DBU? I don't think so. So one of two things has to happen. Either, like, what, this is just facts. Like, one of these two things has to happen. Either one or multiple of the guys I just mentioned dramatically improve, or you have a drastic influx of talent. And maybe that's portal. Maybe it's guys like Jabori Antoine. I don't know. But when I look at the cornerback room for 2025, as it sits today, what you project to have here, there's not a lot of reason for confidence. A guy like Jabori Antoine would signal a shift in the right direction to getting back toward being dominant. We'll see if they can get there. So Jabori Antoine deep commits for now. But again, heavy favorite odds for him to end up in the LSU class, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, y'all. It is Locked on LSU. Thank you so much for being here with us. Tennessee is atop the college baseball world, but Texas firing David Pierce is a massive story, and it's going to have a trickle-down effect potentially on LSU. I'll tell you what I mean as we continue here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. Y'all, I love sports. Like Nate Bargatze would say, I love them so much. And I never want them to stop. But now the College World Series has come to a close. The Stanley Cup Finals are done. We got Major League Baseball still. But, we're not going to have another local sporting event until LSU kicks off against USC out in Vegas on September the 1st. And as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Speaking of which, you can bet on MVP odds. You can bet on live bet games. You can bet division winners. You can even take your long shot. Maybe the Yankees finally getting back and winning the World Series. Been a minute. I'm ready for it. But you can make it all happen over at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So I will get to this news about Texas here in just a quick second. And I know this isn't a Texas podcast, but if you read the tea leaves, there is a pretty significant trickle-down effect that could happen as a result of Texas firing David Pierce that directly impacts LSU. I want to get to that in a second. But there was some news around LSU baseball on Monday as Josh Simpson is back as an LSU assistant coach. So quick story about Josh Simpson. So Simpson worked as a scout with the Texas Rangers from 2016 to 2022. So he's a valued resource for Jay Johnson. And Simpson was a member of the staff in 2023, the national championship winning staff in 2023, in an off-field role. And when Wes Johnson got the Georgia job, he took Simpson with him as an assistant coach. And of course, when that job was vacated, LSU hired Terry Rooney. We all know Terry Rooney, who was pitching coach for Paul Maneri his first 2 years in Baton Rouge, became the head coach at Central Florida, moved around college baseball a good bit, landed back in Baton Rouge for the 2024 season on Jay Johnson's staff. When Paul Maneri got hired at South Carolina, he took Terry Rooney with him to be his pitching coach. And no doubt Terry Rooney's a great coordinator as well, a great recruiter as well. Will help fill that role for Paul Maneri. So with that role being vacant, Jay Johnson is now bringing Josh Simpson back to LSU. He was the director of baseball operations for the championship team a year ago. And, I think this is it's a really significant get for Jay Johnson. And by the way, Simpson's also been a head coach at the JUCO level. He was at New Mexico Junior College from 2008 to 2015. He was the second winningest coach in program history there, had 18 players selected in Major League Baseball. So it's a guy who knows the game. And more so, I would say, even as a scout, is spending all those years from 2016 to 2022 as an MLB scout. One of the things that MLB scouts do that maybe many people aren't familiar is MLB scouts have regions, right? So like the Texas Rangers or the New York Yankees or the Los Angeles Dodgers or whomever, they have regional scouts. So scouts have a certain region, and all they do is blanket that region looking for talent. They look at high schools, they look at showcases, they look at junior college, they look at all the college teams, they look everywhere and anywhere that you can find talent. And scouts are at a ball field darn near every day. So my point is, if you're Josh Simpson and you're at LSU, not only do you have inroads everywhere because everybody wants to talk to a big league scout. If you're a high school coach, if you're a high school parent, if you're a high school player, if you're a college school, whatever, like if a big league scout is coming to check you out, you want to put on for that guy. So you have inroads everywhere. You know everyone. And you watch so much baseball, you know what you're looking for in a talent evaluator, because you're making recommendations to your big league club around the draft as to not only who to pick, but also how much to pay them, where you'd slot them, all that sort of stuff. The scouts have a dramatic role. So the fact that Simpson was an MLB scout for the Rangers from 2016 to 2022 tells you he has amazing connections and inroads and scouting talent ability. So it becomes a massive benefit to Jay Johnson's staff having him back now this year in this off-field role, filling that role for Terry Rooney. So Josh Simpson returns, and it's just in time because he returns to LSU at a time where LSU is very active in the transfer portal right now, as we've gone over. They've added 5 pitchers, most recently Jacob Myers from Nichols. You've added a handful of position players as well, and you're not done because you're going to sweat out the draft next month, early in July, to see, you're just here in a couple of weeks actually, to see who ends up going where and who you have coming back, what high school players may sign, who ends up on campus, like some of the guys we've talked about. Of course, high-level guys like William Schmidt, Boston Bateman, Kate Arambeedi, and then some of the guys on your team, like, is Griffin Herring back? Does Bear Jones sign? I have strong feelings. We've talked about that already. But, based on how all that goes, you still have needs in the transfer portal. Like, LSU still has to address shortstop. Like, what if Michael Braswell signs? You need a shortstop. What if Braswell returns? You still have Stephen Milam and Kucherak, but you need depth. You still have to go get a third baseman. Depending on what happens with Kate Arambeedi, you probably still need another catcher. We told you if you were here on Sunday's episode, I guess on Monday's episode, that Connor Bear Harrison from St. Mary's is the guy LSU is targeting who could be the third catcher. But what if you don't get him? You probably need a few more arms. My point is, LSU has got to get to a 40. You got to fill a roster. You got to get to a 40-man roster. They're not there yet. And so when you have a guy with that much of a scouting background, it helps you with talent evaluation, another sounding board, and of course, inroads to get players as well if there's a relationship there. So all that to say, I really like the hire. You wish you never lost him, but it made sense that he was going to take an opportunity at Georgia. But when LSU had the opportunity to bring him back, it was good to see him come back and hopefully help LSU build a roster back to being a championship level again. All right, y'all. I've teased it enough. I'm going to get to it next. Oh man, my goodness gracious. What's going on in Austin and by extension College Station, Baton Rouge, and the rest of college baseball. We are certainly, my goodness, going to get to all of this. We're glad to have you aboard with us here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. That's right. Very pleased, of course, to be brought to you here every single day by eBay Motors. If it's eBay Motors, they got everything you need to maintain your vehicle, to level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride or die every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, as we wind down this episode of Locked on LSU, you probably saw on Monday that Texas announced the firing of head baseball coach David Pierce, who's been there for 8 years. Now, this is the worst kept secret in college baseball. I don't cover Texas, and I knew this probably 3 weeks ago. Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball even tweeted earlier Monday how this was the worst kept secret in college baseball. What was also a poorly kept secret is that Texas was not going to have a situation arise like the last time they were looking for a head coach. They were not going to fire their coach and then begin their very public search and be told no. They were going to fire David Pierce and turn around and hire their already ready-made replacement. So they've got their guy, or they think they've got their guy. Now, I have some thoughts on that, but just keep in mind, like, let's just connect the dots here. Texas's season ended weeks ago. They didn't just come to the decision now that they were going to fire David Pierce. And by the way, remember, the portal window has already been open for 3 weeks. If you are Texas and you're going to fire your coach, why would you wait 3 weeks into the portal cycle to make this decision? It's counterintuitive. You've done harm to yourself instead of hurrying to get your new guy in there. Like, look at South Carolina. It took them a while to find Mark Kingston's replacement in Paul Maneri, but they fired Mark Kingston 2 days after the season ended. So Texas is known they were moving on from David Pierce. It was only a matter of who. Now, I can look. Kendall Rogers came on my radio show near the end of the regular season, and I was asking him about, it was actually after South Carolina fired Mark Kingston. I said, is the coaching carousel winding down? And he said, in no uncertain terms, LSU fans are going to want to watch Texas because they fired David Pierce. Texas is going to make a run at Jay Johnson. I do not mind telling you this at all, that I can confirm that Texas did reach out. Now, Jay Johnson certainly has plausible deniability. Maybe it was an agent, maybe it was a representative, however it may go. But they did reach out a few weeks ago to gauge interest. And it was Jay Johnson, it was Jim Schlossnagle at A&M, Tony Vitello at Tennessee, and Eric Bakich at Clemson. And as I understand it, all four politely declined. And Texas was going to move on to Mark Wasikowski from Oregon, and Oregon completely grabbed the throat in embarrassing fashion in the Super Regional against Texas A&M. And my guess is that's why that was a non-starter after that. And so maybe then they went back to Texas A&M, because all of the rumors on Monday are that Jim Schlossnagle is the target for the University of Texas. And of course, Texas A&M lost the national championship series to Tennessee on Monday. Their season is now over. So if you're Texas, wouldn't it just fit perfectly on the day that your bitter rival is playing for its first national championship in a major men's team sport since 1939, that on that day is when you would announce the firing of your coach and start rampant speculation about the coach of your bitter rival who's coaching in the national championship game becoming your next coach? Now, listen, I know there's a lot of A&M fans that aren't going to like to hear this, and I don't really care, but this ain't a money thing. A&M could pay Texas. A&M could pay Jim Schlossnagle or whoever anything Texas can. I mean, both got more money than God. But at some point, it's a matter of what will you pay. Do you remember when Texas A&M pursued Dave Aranda to be their defensive coordinator after the 2018 season? And LSU ended up paying Dave Aranda $2 million a year, made him the highest paid coordinator ever at that point. A&M could have paid it, could have matched it. But at some point, you just say, it's like an auction. It's not worth it. I'll move. I'll get somebody else. So it's not that A&M couldn't match or whatever. It's a matter of, does Schlossnagle want out of College Station? And does A&M want to match? Look, A&M's got tons of resources. They're built. They got a beautiful ballpark now. They're building a new almost $90 million stadium. But what I've told is that Jim Schlossnagle or whoever Texas hires is going to go around $2.5 million per year. For context, Jay Johnson wins the national championship at LSU. LSU gave him a 7-year, $12.55 million contract, which averages out to 1.7, 1.8 per year. Talking about 2.5 at Texas. It's a massive raise, relatively speaking. So if you're Schlossnagle, you listen. And of course, because Chris Del Conte's the AD at Texas. I promise there's an LSU time to get to it. But Chris Del Conte was the AD at TCU when Schlossnagle was there. They overlapped for, I think, 7 or 8 years. So Del Conte didn't hire Schlossnagle, but he became the AD in 2007. Schloss became the head coach at TCU in 2004. And so they overlapped for 7, 8 years. And as I understand, they get along very well. So if there's someone who's a great friend, who you love to work for, who's got unlimited resources, who's going to break the bank to pay you, who is going to pay your staff, you got all the NIL resources you need, they're desperate to win, I get why you listen. And what a flex it would be for Texas if in the year they come into the SEC, they steal away a coach from their bitter rival who just had them in the College World Series championship series. Again, I want to say this. I have no idea if that's going to happen. Even if they have an agreement in principle, it's never done until it's really done. I mean, how many examples do we have of coaches who had agreed in principle and backed out? We saw it in 07. Les Miles. Les Miles was going to Michigan. Like, you can bury your head in the sand, deny that all you want. Les Miles in 2007 was taking the Michigan job, period. He was taking that job. And then Kirk Herbstreit made Les Miles go do that weird press conference, and then LSU beats Tennessee, and all the upsets happen, and boom, LSU's playing for a national championship. All of a sudden, Les Miles ain't going nowhere. He's playing for a national championship. Billy Donovan got introduced as the Orlando Magic head coach. A couple days later, I think I made a mistake, went back to Florida. I don't even remember the guy's name. Patrick something or other, who was the softball coach at Bama, was introduced as the new head softball coach at LSU. A couple days later, went back to Tuscaloosa, made a mistake. So even sometimes when they're introduced, they get cold feet and backtrack. So I don't know what Jim Schlossnagle is going to do. So, and by the way, I've told the backup plan for Texas, if they don't get their guy, who I'm assuming is Schlossnagle, would be Skip Johnson from Oklahoma. How interesting would that be? So Texas is trying to pillage A&M or Oklahoma. We'll see if it all transpires. But here's the point that's relevant, certainly from an LSU perspective. And it's that LSU's not done in the portal. And the reality is the portal has really slowed as of now. And there hasn't been these elite level guys in the portal this year. So now, with Pierce being fired, there's a 30-day portal window that opens up for Texas players. Whoever Texas hires when their coach leaves, if it's I don't know, if it's Schlossnagle, whoever, I don't know. Whoever that guy is, his roster now has a 30-day extended portal window open up, and you better believe guys are going to leave. And then whoever that team hires, and then there's the domino effect. So effectively, what Texas has done in firing David Pierce is set off a domino effect that's going to kickstart another cycle of portal moves. And keep in mind, the portal closes on Tuesday, a week from today, Tuesday, July 2nd, the portal closes. But if a team loses their coach, the coach leaves or is fired or whatever, that's negated or nullified, and a 30-day window opens regardless of when that cycle closes. So the point being, Jay Johnson, who's still looking to add to this team, is going to have more fish in the pond soon because of Texas firing David Pierce and what's going to happen beyond that. So if you thought the portal was slowing, keep in mind, look, Gavin Killeen, the shortstop from Louisville, the number one player in the portal, he's visited Vanderbilt, Tennessee, LSU, and was waiting to visit Texas A&M. What if Texas A&M's coach leaves? Maybe he goes and visits them Texas. I don't know. But my point is, all of this now, this dust pile has been kicked and stirred up again, and it just means more opportunity for Jay Johnson to throw his line in the water and see what he can come up with. So get ready. A new portal cycle is coming now in baseball because of Texas firing David Pierce. And of course, we'll have it covered for you here every single day on Locked On LSU, your team every day. And I'd love to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Okay, that'll do it for us here on Locked On LSU. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast, however you are listening, thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single weekday and weekends for bonus coverage on Locked On LSU, your team every day.